This is one of the most interesting ETFs on the market, in my opinion. First off, read this disclaimer carefully. Okay, let's first look at where this ETF is. Okay, so it is in the sectors. Specifically, we can categorize it as an industrials, and it is space exploration. So there's a new ETF on the market called Procure Space ETF. UFO is the ticker. You can see here the distance from the 52-week low and 52-week highs. We don't have much data, and so of course we could look at the seasonality, but it's very new. We cannot really draw any conclusions out of this. Too little data. But this is what we have so far. Okay, so let's first look a bit at the charts. So this ETF, it gives you exposure to the space exploration industry, and long term I find it extremely difficult to become bearish on this, especially when you can get an ETF. It is certainly the case that there will be bankruptcies in the space exploration space for individual companies. That is why an ETF, which gives you diversified exposure, can be very beneficial here. The bankruptcies will not be because these are bad companies. It simply is very, very expensive to explore space, huge R&D costs. Hence, you have these companies that need to get more and more money from investors, and that can become a difficult conversation because investors very often have a more shorter-term outlook, and they want to see a return fast, which in space exploration, they are not going to see that quickly. Okay, so this is the chart in front of us. All the data we have, not much data. First data point we get here is from, we literally have to go to, literally this year here, actually. June 8th. Very little data. You can see that it did go down with the overall market during, the crash. That is not a huge surprise, given that space exploration is something that it's perceived as not something we absolutely have to spend money on. It's not like a utility. It is something that just is way out there in the future, and it's a high cost. So it is kind of a discretionary-ish spending, but if you look long term, I would make the case that it will be sort of like a utility long into the future, in the sense that we just have to do it. Okay, you see that it has tried to recover a bit from the lows, form a double bottom here, but this performance is weak compared to like the Nasdaq and S&P 500 and actually quite a few other indexes. However, you could make the case that long term, these values and even this value is a very low value for this ETF compared to where it could be in the future. Because long term, as I said, it's very difficult to make a very bearish case for space exploration. For all intents and purposes, it is the future. We have made huge strides recently with the privatization of space exploration. The billionaires are certainly behind this, hence I would not be surprised to see some other space exploration stocks go public. But all in all, maybe we find support here at the 50-day moving average. Possible. We do, however, have lower highs and lower lows. So yes, it is weak. It is not screaming buy at the moment, unless you have a very long-term horizon. Then, this is one of those buy the dips ETFs. The accumulation distribution line, it is interesting that if you look here, it actually was, there is some strength here in the accumulation distribution line, which suggests that some of the smarter money maybe are moving into this space, because they might look a bit more long-term. But yeah, the technicals are what they are. The correlation with the S&P 500 is not available because we do not have enough data. But it is quite clear that it is weaker than the S&P 500. Okay, let's look a bit at some other metrics. There is actually a 0.61% dividend. That's interesting. Here you can see the performance year to date, minus 26%. The performance for the quarter was not that bad, 17%. Here you can see some trend lines that Finviz paints in, suggesting that we are now testing also not simply this moving average support, but also the trend line support. Though generally speaking, I'm not a fan of trend lines, because statistically speaking they do not make much sense. Here are some additional data. Expense ratio 0.75%. I think literally this is the only space exploration ETF, hence there's little competition, hence they can ask for a higher expense ratio. Though long term, I definitively think there will be much more competition as far as space exploration ETF goes. More alternatives. Looking at the PE here, 13, that is actually not that bad. If you go here to holdings, Maxar Technologies, I've looked at that company before. Virgin Galactic, pretty decent. By the way, remember to subscribe to the channel, because it gives more momentum, and then more and better content will be easier to create, because the algorithms, they just work in that way. And we can also attract people to the channel that can give us special intel. Garmin, Arbicom. Okay, so some of these companies are not like what I would call pure play space exploration stocks, but overall this just gives you, space exploration exposure. Yeah. And there are, you do have, of course, Elon Musk and Jeff Bezos. They have their own companies, but they are private. Hopefully they will go public. SpaceX becoming a part of it. Blue Origin could possibly go public. I mean, so yeah, long term it looks very interesting. Let's look at fund flows. Here again, we do not have that much data. There seems to be recently some fund flows. More fund flows certainly than outflows, so that's interesting. Well, let's actually break down the holdings a bit more. View more charts. Communications, big. You can see here technology, industrials, Harris market cap breakdown. You do actually have some decent balance here between large, small, and micro cap. Mid cap is interestingly the smallest, but that could very well be because in order to be in this whole space exploration space, it's a bit either or, I guess. Regional breakdown, very dominated by North America. Europe also sort of in there. Asia Pacific is certainly one of those that could become much bigger going forward. Market share breakdown. Yeah. Okay, so to sum up my take here on this ETF, I am definitively very bullish long term. I find it very difficult to make a bearish case for space exploration long term. The bearish case that is simply, as I stated, the R&D costs and the operational costs for these companies are tremendous. And very often they have to talk to their investors, hey, okay, we need a little bit more money, it is very expensive, and then there is always the risk that investors are going to be like, well, we have waited a long time to see the return on our investment, we cannot do this anymore, simply we gotta get out of this. But many investors also have a long-term outlook, and the great news is that billionaires like Elon Musk and Jeff Bezos are getting into this space, and they have deep pockets and they can burn through a lot of money. They just can. And there probably will be other billionaires as well coming into this space. I mean, of course, you do have Richard Branson, he is in this space, but there's many others that could decide that, well, I want to be part of this great revolution where we go into space and actually colonize other planets and so on and so forth. Okay, as you saw with the so let me give you a bit of my controversial opinions about space exploration. I actually do think that we are not alone in the universe. I do think that there's a lot of alien life out there. I think also that they have visited our planet many times. There's actually a pretty good documentary on Netflix called Unacknowledged. I would recommend that one because The great thing about that documentary is that it shows you a lot of, serious people who believe and have seen, extraterrestrial activity on our planet. So it's not like, a bunch of hillbillies who were like super drunk and saw UFOs. I mean, there are military personnel, governmental personnel who have seen extraterrestrials. And you might ask yourself the question, okay, if there are aliens visiting our planet, why haven't they like parked on, the front lawn of the White House? Well, we, as human beings, we do have contact with inferior species on our own planet. We have contacts with lions, with mice, and many animals. However, do we as humans have an official delegation to like the gorillas? No, we don't. We study them from afar. And the gorillas, if you view us from the gorillas' perspective as an example, they probably don't really understand what we are about. They probably do not understand that we are the people who have built these buildings. To them, we are just these strange creatures that every now and then look at them from afar. I mean, they're probably very perplexed about what we are. Maybe similarly to the way we are perplexed about extraterrestrials. So view it from that perspective, like it could very well be that the species that are advanced enough to travel to our planet, they are so far ahead of us that for them it doesn't make any sense to have any contact with us, to speak with us. It could be that our language is so extraordinarily simplistic to them that communication with us is basically meaningless. It would be like trying to talk to a cat about quantum mechanics. You can try, of course, to try to explain quantum mechanics to a cat, but it will be utterly meaningless. It will be a futile endeavor. It will not. The cat has no idea what you're doing. It could that could explain it. But yeah, I do think there's tons of life out there that probably do. And think about the religions. What is the common denominator for every religion on the entire planet? Every religion is about non-humans coming down to talk to humans and give all kinds of messages, usually in the form of moral and ethical statements. That's interesting. That's the core interest of these beings. It's philosophical. So yeah, I think it's a thing. Yeah. I think it makes a lot of sense. I mean, if you think about life on our own planet, it's very diverse. We have microorganisms that thrive in acid. Yes, life is very robust, so there's probably extreme variety of life. They probably are able to exist. Life is probably able to evolve on planets that would be extremely hostile to us. Yeah, okay. So leave your comments in the comment section. I know it is sort of like almost politically incorrect to believe there's aliens and that they've visited our planet, but I think it makes a lot of sense. There are literally 800 quintillion planets in our universe. So yeah. But watch the documentary Unacknowledged. It's really, really good. Okay, so here is the S&P 500 futures. Today we are having a little bit of a weak day. We did have some strength yesterday, but it didn't get above this level here or this high here. So all in all, we are basically in this shuffling sideways. I do expect a correction, but yeah, we haven't seen a major correction yet, but we are very much due a correction. If someone were to give me like, let's say $100,000, but there was two conditions, I could either be long the S&P 500 for 2 months or short S&P 500 for 2 months. Maybe that was my only options. I would probably actually prefer to be short. But that is just what I think currently. Okay, whatever you do, of course, don't fight the trend, and may the trend be with you.